Security is a scary thing. It involves fear and worry and uncertainty. It involves predators and thieves and sociopaths. And we don't want to think that these things can ever happen to us. This is the golden age of scamming. You're going to come across them in person, via email, via text, via phone, via social media.
I'm Shawnee Delaney. I spent years undercover as a Defense Intelligence Agency case officer.
And I'm Tyler Gray. I served as a U.S. Army Ranger sniper, as well as an assaulter in an elite Tier 1 counterterrorism unit. This is Control Room.
So you swipe your card at the gas pump, and then you drive away. But so does all your banking information. Joining us today is Robert Siciliano, cybersecurity awareness expert and general badass. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Hey, Shawnee.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Great to meet you.
As well.
So, can you give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I am a true blue Bostonian, and I have been speaking and consulting on security awareness for pretty much all my life, since I was like 10, 12 years old. It became a passion of mine early on when I had met my first victim of sexual assault, and that really had a profound effect on the way I viewed the world. From that point on, I started to take self-defense classes and teach all those around me what I was learning. And eventually that evolved into a profession in my late teens, early 20s. And then in the mid-90s, my small business was hacked, right? I suffered thousands of dollars in credit card fraud, and that gave me insight to black hat hacking. And from that point on, I said, this is gonna be one of the biggest things ever, and it really has become one of the biggest things ever, if not the perfect crime.
Absolutely. What do you feel, we're talking about the dark web and getting information there. Where do you feel is a physical place that is very high risk for getting your data taken?
So obviously, like ATM skimming and gas pump skimming, these are all issues that people are well concerned about, right? And they have reason to be. Skimming has been around for quite some time. Mostly, the cards that are most vulnerable are the ones that still possess the magnetic strip. And here in the US, all of our cards still possess the magnetic strip. Overseas, and I think even in Mexico and Canada, they may not be producing cards with the magnetic strip. It might just be the chip, but we still have that strip. You're most vulnerable to ATM-type skimming, where they put a 3D printed facade over the face of the card slot, right? They stick it right on there. And when you put your card through, it has technology in it that skims the information off that magnetic strip. And usually there's another piece of the puzzle. It's a small wireless camera that either is in a drop ceiling or it's in a small stick-on the face of the ATM somewhere that will see either the keypad or the monitor itself. And as you're punching in your PIN code, it grabs that information. And that right there allows the bad guy to create a cloned card under your name and account, and they go after midnight and they grab the most amount of dollars they can, whether it's $500 to $700 for the day. And they can do that every day until you find out about it.
So is there something people can see physically on a gas pump or an ATM machine to detect that this is a skimmer?
Yeah, so there's a couple things going on here. There's a few different types of skimmers, actually. There's the facade that goes on the face of the gas pump and or the ATM.
And can you tell when you look at it?
Well, when you look at it, not necessarily, because all the colors usually match up. It looks like it belongs there. That facade is designed so you can't tell. But if you kind of like tool around with it, kind of like pull around on it, if you can pop something off via two-sided tape, then yeah, you got a skimmer in your hand. That's a problem. Walk into the bank branch. Generally, I tell people use the ATM at the bank branch, which is less susceptible to this type of crime, but not 100% still. And then there's another part of the scheme called shimming. So there's skimming and there's shimming. And so shimming is when they actually take hardware and they insert it inside the card slot, which you are not going to see.
And how do they do that?
So it's thin, thin, thin. It's like paper thin, and it goes inside the card slot. And when you put your card in, it reads the data off the chip. And they might have a keypad overlay that grabs your actual, PIN code. And then from there, they extract that data, sometimes wirelessly. It might transmit the information wirelessly out to the parking lot via SMS or Bluetooth.
So I think there's a critical point that I think is worth making, which is, and this is, again, this is reality, and that is criminals have become way, 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 way more sophisticated, with technology, I should say, and therefore we have to become more sophisticated with our security awareness.
Not only are they more sophisticated, more than anything, they are more organized. And when you treat crime as a business, you're gonna get that much better at it, and you're gonna make that much more money at it. Whereas when it comes to consumers, general public, we still treat crime and security as one of those things where it can't happen to me. And we're not as digitally literate in regards to preventing crime, preventing scams as we could and should be. And it's just a matter of basic education, a matter of showing the need and the want. And once people grasp it, they're like, I want this, I need this, I can do this, this is within my capacity.
I think is a really valid point. Like when we talk about cybersecurity as a whole, people don't realize that it affects every single one of us every day.
Yeah. All security is personal security. That's always been my philosophy. Even if it's like cybersecurity, it begins with the person. It begins with, your understanding and your view as to what security is and what security isn't, and how you approach the world around you. And when you view security as something that is personal to you, you're more apt to be more involved in security in the workplace as well. And when security becomes second nature, you begin to see things coming down the pike, as they say, and you become that much more proactive when it comes to reducing risk.
One thing that I really like about your mentality towards this is you think that people need to have that what's in it for me attitude. And that's so true. Like when I was conducting espionage, when I was trying to recruit someone, I had to put the benefits up front. It had to impact them and their families. And it's the same thing for cybersecurity. You hear so many people say, well, it's not going to affect me, or I don't have anything important to steal, things like that. Do you hear that a lot?
Most people kind of function in a level of denial that it can't or won't happen to me because, security is a kind of a scary thing. It involves fear and worry and uncertainty. It involves predators and thieves and sociopaths. And we don't want to think that these things can ever happen to us. It boils down to trust. Okay, so human beings are what we call an interdependent species, which means that we rely and depend on each other for our survival, for our procreation. That is, the fundamental of that begins with trust. You come out of your mama trusting, okay? And so as you're young and throughout life, you pretty much trust pretty much everybody you meet. And pretty much every email you get and text message you get and phone call you receive and what you read and what you see on TV and what you get via streaming, you pretty much all day, every day, trust.
I have a great analogy or a great story for this, actually. So when I was conducting espionage, I used to have different covers, right? And so what I would do, depending on the cover, is some of them required business cards. And I would print out these business cards on the horrible, cheap paper with like the perforated edges, and I would hand it to people, and they trusted that I was who I said I was.
The easiest form of fake ID is a business card.
100%.
Right?
100%.
And so because of this fundamental trust that we all possess, we go throughout the day, week, month, year, trusting. And the bad guys know this. And what they do is they take perfectly reasonable scenarios and interject them into our lives that revolve around the ultimate goal of getting sensitive information, getting credit card data, getting money, getting you to buy Bitcoin, whatever the case is. And they use all of these ruses, right, to get us to ultimately transfer wealth to them, and they fundamentally rely on our good nature and on our trust, okay?
What's so critical on that is, and I made this mistake for years, part of it is that good people assume that everyone is like them.
And here's the deal with that. So I've been doing this for all of my adult life. And I have, through the research that I have done, I have come to the conclusion that 97% of all the people you will ever come across in your entire life are worthy of your trust. 97%. But what that means is that about 3% are not. And that 3% is made up of antisocial personality disorders, which include hardcore narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. And what people don't understand about that is that these are people that are just like you and I. They look like us, they act like us, they function pretty much like you and I do. However, they look at you and I as like we owe them something. Like we are their victims, they are the perpetrator, and they are deserving of what we have.
And they have no empathy.
No empathy, no sympathy, no guilt, no remorse, okay? And that 3%, it is likely that you're gonna come across them in person, via email, via text, via phone, right? Via social media.
I think I've dated them all, actually.
Me too. Yeah. And that is perfectly natural and perfectly normal. And when you understand that there's like 3% out there that like I need to be aware of, it provides you with a bit of a different perspective. That like, okay, it may not happen to me, but there's a 3%, let's just say, chance that it could happen to me. Therefore, I need to have these basic systems in place.
So one thing I want to circle back to is what you've touched on earlier about the emotional aspect of it and the psychology behind everything, right? Humans have natural human traits that threat actors can leverage, and we can pull the strings. I used to do it myself, right, when I was manipulating people to try to get them to steal secrets. But this is the same thing that organized criminal groups and fraud rings and nation states are all using against people. Can you touch on that?
Yeah. So I speak all over the country to people, and everywhere, coast to coast. And in certain parts of the country, like, people don't know where their house keys are. Like they have had their house for 30, 40 years and they have no idea where the house keys are because they don't lock their doors. And it's like, okay, so, and I say, well, why don't you lock your doors? And the answer is because I don't want to live like that. Yeah. And it's like, well, live like what? Well, I don't want to be paranoid. I don't want to have to worry. I just want to be free. And it's like, well, when we think that like security is about worry and fear, we are not going to embrace security. I ask my audiences all the time, like, and this is a true question, like, let's just say we don't know each other. And both of you like are kind of insecurity, so like, kind of be generous with your answer. Like, and this is actually true. I'm a guy that has 22 security cameras, okay? So when you hear like, okay, this guy's got 22 security cameras, what is your first impulse, like in regards to like, what is my disposition, my world outlook? Like, how do I look at the world around me? I must be what?
Well, yeah, I mean, the traditional answer for people would be paranoid.
Okay, so here's the deal, right? Paranoia is a mental health issue. It is a disease, right? The American Medical Association says it is a disease. And when we associate paranoia, which is being out of control, with security, which is putting systems in place to gain some control. Preparedness, right?
You took my word.
That dichotomy, right, prevents us from embracing security.
So everything you're talking about, when you're saying paranoid and people are thinking with that kind of paranoid mindset, what it really is preparedness. So what are some things that people can really do to prepare themselves and better mitigate these risks?
Yeah, so when I talk about how all security fundamentally is personal, you start with your physical being. You start with like taking physical self-defense classes, Studies show that as many as 1 out of 4 young women can be sexually assaulted, right? And so teaching your daughters how to properly protect themselves when they're out in the world. It begins with that, right? And then from there, the basics like, locking the doors to your home, locking your car. You would lock it in when you're on the streets. Why not lock it in your driveway? Like basic stuff. And you get yourself into a mindset of engaging in basic security practices, and then things like password management, identity theft protection, antivirus all make sense to you. And you want to do these things because you want to not just protect your person, you want to protect your data and your dollars as well.
Yeah, and the other thing I think you're protecting too is time. And I don't think people realize how much time, if something goes wrong, for instance, my car or Jeep, whatever, was stolen a couple of years ago, out from a garage, in a gated garage, and the amount of time that it took me, okay, the insurance covered the car, great, but they didn't cover my time that I had to spend to file the claim and do all that. The other thing I want to say, which I think is so important, is that people, you mentioned paranoia. We have to disassociate paranoia and preparedness because they're two different things. Preparedness is not paranoia.
Yeah.
Right.
And I talk all the time about how, like, one of the best, most effective time management tools in my entire life is a password manager.
I think what's important about that for people to understand is it may seem more complicated, but once you truly understand it, it's actually more simple because it's one code. Not only is it remembering all the codes, but it's also, filling it in for you. So it's like, yeah, great. You may have it written in a book next to your computer on a little sticky note on your computer, and
Please
that's
don't do
fine.
that.
I know. We'll talk about that later. But what happens when you're on your phone, away from your computer? Oh, my password, and now you don't have it.
Yeah. So one thing that you had mentioned about saving time, people don't want to be inconvenienced with time. But when we think about all the things that you had mentioned that we should do, have identity theft protection, have the password managers, et cetera, et cetera. One thing I want to share is that my identity has been hacked, it's been breached, it's been stolen multiple times. The Target breach, the OPM breach, other breaches, and the amount of time that I spent trying to, report it to police and get the police report and deal with the credit bureaus and all that. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
And at the time I didn't have, this is years and years ago, I didn't have the proper things in place. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, I've had criminal hackers email me my own social security number. Hey, security guy, here's your social, haha. Basically flexing their muscles, show me how cool they are. And I could care less, because one of the things I speak to is like to make the data useless to the thief. So how do you make the data? So people always come up to me, oh, my information is in the dark web. What do I do? And they're all freaked out. It's like, okay, so water is wet, the sky is blue, chocolate is yummy, your information is on the dark web.
Right.
It's like, okay, that's just the way it is. Email, social security number, many, many passwords, and so forth. So by making the data useless to the thief, you are essentially like inoculating yourself. You're getting a vaccine, so to speak, right? And that means, like with identity theft protection, it's monitoring not just your information on the dark web, but it's monitoring your credit, not just after the fact, but in real time. As applications are being processed for credit, identity theft protection, not all of them, will see the credit application as it's being processed and alert you and say, hey, is this you, Robert? Or is this somebody else? If it's not you, let's deal with this right now and stop that application before it actually becomes fact.
I think there are a lot of steps that people can take. I like to call it a security onion, right? If you just add layer after layer, they can be little layers and little steps, but it makes it that much harder for the threat actors to hit you, and they're going to move on to, like you said, the low-hanging fruit, people who are not protected in any way.
Yeah, it's all about becoming a tougher target. I mean, that's really all it is. When you do 5 or 10 different things, like basic things, you become a hard target versus, an easy target. And if people would just adopt that basic, not only would they save time, ultimately they would save money too.
Yeah.
So, Robert, you just mentioned, the 10 things that someone can do to make themselves a harder target. What are those 10 things, or at least a few of them?
Yeah, so security 101, right? Like we've discussed, like it starts with the person, like self-defense, right? And you get your mindset into it. I'm a big believer in like a home security system. Just having like the keypad and the alarm and a couple of cameras, just to kind of like watch your back while you're sleeping, and contact Alarm Central. Like these are basic things that like get you into a mindset. It's like we put our seatbelts on because it's the smart thing to do, right? You are managing and reducing risk, right? And like that's 3 things right there. And then from there, identity theft protection, freezing your credit, which is so important. It's a free tool that's available to everybody.
I do that for myself and my kids.
And your kids, 17 and under being children, right? Freezing your credit, right? So there's like 4 or 5 just right there. We talk password manager, which is a really big deal, but such a simple thing. Antivirus, which like should be on everybody's device, including your Macs, right? While there are millions and millions of viruses targeting Windows machines, there's still thousands targeting Macs. You don't necessarily need it or can even get it for an iPhone, but you do need antivirus for an Android, right? So antivirus. And then from there, like consider a VPN, a virtual private network software program. Yeah. A VPN is a software that you would download, sometimes for free, sometimes for a small fee.
But be careful on the free ones. Right?
Yeah, because they can sometimes collect certain types of data.
Nothing's free.
No. Be careful. I think for all the tools you're talking about, you need to go with ones that are well known and
reputable,
established. Yeah, there are a lot of free apps and things not free apps even on the Google Play Store and Apple iTunes Store that have turned out to be not good.
Yeah, paid products are always better, and due to the fact that like you want to invest in your. Look, I know that like Wells Fargo, for example, spends like $100 million a month on security, right? How would you feel if like Wells Fargo was using like free antivirus? You know what I mean? Like I think that would be a problem for us. Right? And like they should be spending what's necessary to protect me and my money and so forth, right? So if you do these basic things, you're going to be that much more secure than say your neighbor who's not doing any of these things.
Robert, this is fascinating stuff, and I know we've gone through different steps people can do to protect themselves, but what do you want the audience to take away from this the most?
I think the most important thing is like all of this is within your capacity. Like it's just like riding a bike. Once you achieve that balance, you can do it for the rest of your life. Cybersecurity, personal protection, personal security is no different. Start with like, okay, the likelihood of it happening to me is slim, but it can happen to me. Recognize risk. Every time the phone rings, you get an email, you get a text message, because bad guys are contacting us or someone 24/7, 365. And as long as you see and understand and recognize risk, you will reduce that risk, not just for you, but for everybody in your family.
Yeah, great
I think that's great. And you said earlier about the seatbelt. Like people put on their seatbelt because they're aware that an accident can happen. And I think it's critical that people have to accept that this could happen. And once they accept it, then they're going to be more likely to put on their seatbelt.
Yeah. These are smart things to do. It doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you intelligent.
Be sure to like and subscribe and leave comments. We would love to hear from you.
New episodes coming every week on LifeLock's YouTube channel.